Hey, Lauren. When we first started talking about accountability leadership, I feel like we were inundated with all these things. We kept seeing it everywhere in Harvard Business Review, in the business literature, in talks, in lay literature. It was all over coming at us. What does accountability leadership mean to you?
Yeah, it's such a great topic. I think we were also seeing it in our workshops, right? It kept coming up about accountability. And so I like to sort of frame this a little bit about thinking about responsibility and accountability, because they are a little different. Responsibility is like my own internal commitment to getting something done. Accountability is helping somebody else with their commitment to get things done. But what we find is that without accountability, we see these behaviors that rise up that really are in conflict with getting results.
I think it's really true, right? That's what we see. So we see that that's a problem. We know we want to change. What's the problem? What's in the way of this working?
Yeah, I like to begin this conversation in terms of what are the barriers to accountability, because they're very real. And there can potentially be a lot of them. So there's sometimes legal issues, there can be hierarchy issues, there can be safety culture issues. And then the other one that we stumbled upon that I thought was really interesting is that sometimes kindness is an issue. And people don't say things or don't want to hold people accountable because they want to be kind.
Yeah. For fear of not being kind, for fear of people judging you. I think this sort of two sides of the same coin of this fear and kindness is sort of an interesting phenomenon.
Yeah, it's true. No matter what the driver is, and I do think fear is some of it, or just not wanting to get on somebody's bad side potentially, what ends up happening is that when you're not saying what needs to be said, it all becomes very murky. And then nobody knows what the expectation is. The follower in the dynamic doesn't know really what success looks like, what the timelines are, what is expected of them. The leader doesn't know maybe that the follower is struggling and needs some help. And so nobody's moving forward. They're all on their own path.
Yeah. Remember how much reading we did when we first started learning about this? And we saw all these different models, and none of them 100% resonated with us. And remember, it was me, you, and Josh Hartzell at the time. So we made our own model, the
Buseber.
Yeah, the Buseber, right? Jessica Bunin, Josh Hartzell, and Lauren Weber, right? But we decided there's really like 5 steps to making this work. The first thing is building the relationships. We have to have that trust. We have to have an environment where people can give each other real feedback. All the talking but you can't do that without good relationships. So step 1, building the relationships. Step 2, we decided is setting those expectations, just like you were saying. If people don't know what they're supposed to be doing, where do they even begin, right? So if they don't know what the expectations are. So that's number 2. The third step is the idea of co-creating goals. Like, great for everyone to have goals, but even better if we can create them together, build them off of each other, and then ensure that those are consistent with the mission. So co-creating the goals. And then this idea of check-ins, right? But check-ins not only to make sure that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, but check-ins to know how I can support you in doing what you're doing, where your roadblocks are, where there's obstacles, how I can help, what's going really well. Like, do we need to move the goalpost because we've already gotten there? Check-ins for that purpose. And then that final step, I think, is interesting too, and so important to not only inspire motivation, but to keep that motivation going. So those are the 5 steps. Did any of those particularly resonate with you?
Yeah, I love them all. I think for me, what struck me as you're talking about them is the check-in specifically. I love that you use how and what questions. There's a curiosity component to check-in that's really important. It brings a level of compassion to accountability, right? We're really checking in to see how you're doing as well. Like, there's the project, and then there's you and how we can help. So I think curiosity lends a level of support to the person who's trying to do the work because you're working together.
Yeah, which takes me to the whole graph that I sort of visualize when I think about this. I have a graph for everything, right? But I think on that x-axis is really support, and on that y-axis is accountability. And if we can like optimize that and have high levels of support and high levels of accountability, then we have optimal culture. Then we have psychological safety. Then we have accountability leadership, right? What does that mean to you?
I mean, it's important. I think it's important actually to call out the other potential combinations for that, right? So you could have low support, low psychological support and culture, and high accountability. This is the sort of stick method, right? Somebody is micromanaging you, like you don't want to step outside your lane because you're going to get slapped on the wrist, and everybody's just like keeping their head down. Nobody's talking to each other. Those are toxic environments. On the other end, maybe you have great psychological safety. Everybody's super kind, right? But nobody's holding anybody accountable. And what we find in that dynamic is that teams are very ineffective, and then they start to turn on each other, right? Everybody resents the other for the differentiation in workloads.
Yeah,
So
this artificial kindness that doesn't really work out.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think if we're truly going to have compassionate leadership, if we're truly going to have accountability leadership, we really need to have that accountability support. We need to think about the 5 steps that go into that. I love the talk that we put together that really talks about how to dive into each of those and talk about what behaviors people can change, what things are hard to change, what things are low-hanging fruit, and how to make a difference, right? Any particular parts that you think people should tune in for?
I think, at All Levels Leadership, we do this as a workshop, and we love to get in front of people and talk about this because it does get nuanced. And I think it's fair to say, hey, there's fear, but then what's the next step? And that's what we do when we work with people is like, let's articulate the fears and let's find a way past. So I agree. I hope people join us to learn more.
Yeah.